Hey everybody, we're back with the Encyclopedia of the Ancient World, and we're going to talk about the early Greeks. And let's start out with just Greece itself is a hot, dry country in the southern part of Europe. It has a very long, jagged coastline, very mountainous, and juts out into the Mediterranean Sea. And then in the sea, it's surrounded by about hundreds of different islands. Okay, and you go all the way back to the Stone Age, where the first Greeks were there and they lived in caves. And they hunted bison and reindeer. They gathered wild plants. They used tools that were made of bone and flint. Eventually, as they started settling some more of the areas, you came into the first farmers in the Greek area. And somewhere around 6000 BC, the farmers started settling in eastern Greece. There they grew wheat and vegetables. They kept sheep. They also fished to supplement their diet. They had some problems with farming, though, because there's not a lot of land that's suitable for farming. So they could only farm in the narrow valleys and the coastal plains. As we entered the Bronze Age, which is around 3000 BC to 1100 BC, we discovered the Greeks were able to discover bronze by mixing copper and tin. They used this to make tools and weapons that were harder and sharper than the stone and flint could be. And they made farming and building much easier with these tools. Eventually, as these farmers continued to grow and be a little more successful with their farming, they created the first towns in the area. The farming efficiency basically meant they had more food than any one family could eat. And so they were able to use that extra food to exchange for other goods, such as tools and pottery. At that point, because there's such excess, people who were craftsmen were able to focus strictly on their craft instead of having to farm and try to craft, because they could trade their crafts for the food they needed to survive. During this time, the population of Greece increases and the villages started to grow into towns and just continue to grow and populate the area. One of these areas, an island group called the Cyclades, the archaeologists found proof that there was a thriving culture on these islands between 2600 and 2000 BC. They had proof that there was craftsmen and a major trade that was going on with the islands, but they were too small to develop into anything kind of major at that point. And so early Greece kind of just developed as most people do, most civilizations did. And then we come into the time period where we deal with the Minoans, okay? They were the first European civilization that developed in Crete. Okay, Crete is one of the largest, it's actually the largest Greek island. And it was archaeologists who discovered things that allowed us to know what happened there in Crete. Specifically, Sir Arthur Evans was a British archaeologist, and he found that there was a civilization that flourished on Crete around 2000 BC. He named it the Minoan civilization after the legendary king of Crete named Minos. Mysteriously, though, this civilization died out about 1,000 years later. But because of his archaeological finds, and some other things, we were able to know quite a bit about the Minoan civilization. And so specifically, let's talk about their life for a little while, the Minoan life. It was based around several large palaces, okay? There was multiple different palaces all over the island of Crete. Each was at the heart of a thriving local community. They had skilled craftsmen, they had artists, they had scribes. This life was highly organized with an economy and a trade. They traded with Greece, the Cyclades Islands, Egypt, the Eastern Mediterranean. And we know a lot of this from frescoes or wall paintings that were found during excavations. Most of this information, like I said, is derived from the frescoes. And these different frescoes showed that people made their living by farming. They also fished and hunted. The men wore loincloths and a short kilt, and the women wore bright dresses with frilled skirts. We also, from these frescoes, could tell different things about their houses. And there was different, I guess you might say, levels of housing. First, you had the palace, okay? It's where the royal families lived, the courtiers lived. Anybody that was associated with the family, the palace family, and was living in the palace. Then you had houses for just ordinary people. These were outside the palace grounds. They had storage and cooking areas downstairs with living and sleeping areas upstairs. and like I said, he named it the Minoans from the legend of King Minos. And this legend basically says that the god Zeus fell in love with a beautiful princess called Europa. And at some point, Zeus turns himself into a bull and swims to Crete with her on his back. And then they have children, and Minos is one of the three sons and becomes the king of Crete. And scholars think that Minos may have been a Cretan title for all kings of the area. But regardless, we get this legend of Minos, and it's kind of turned into the naming for the Minoan people, the people that lived there. Now, whether it was just a legend or the name given to all the kings, we're not exactly sure. But like I said, we found most of this evidence and are able to date some of it through the archaeologists and the information that they find through their digs. And archaeologists can use this information from other cultures to help them date new excavation sites. For example, the Minoan pottery. It was found in Egypt long before the sites on Crete were ever found. There were similar pots found on Crete. And so, because they knew some of the dating from Egypt and the pottery was the same, they can go back and are able to date the civilization on Crete according to the Egyptian finds. So that's just kind of real briefly some information on early Greek and the beginning of the Minoan people. Thank you.